Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shellcross, licensed agent with Second City Real Estate. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley, founder and owner of GC Realty. Mark, what do you want our listeners to do to that subscribe button?
Smash that subscribe button and make sure you give the thumbs up and leave us 5-star reviews and do whatever you can to share the value you get from this podcast.
That was a little weak. That was a little weak smash, but we'll let it ride.
All right. I'll save the better smash for the end. All right.
All right, perfect. So wait, you had a funny story that we were talking about off air. Let's hear this. Let's let the listeners get a little taste of this.
Well, so I went to the Cubs game last night and I left pretty early. So it was kind of a party pooper. I think I valued sleep and going to the gym this morning better than hanging out there late to watch them not play that great. But so as I was leaving, there's a property we're onboarding that was actually referred to us by another investor, referred to us by John Warren. So thank you. And he's buying a building right there in Wrigleyville. And I'm walking around this property, I'm taking pictures, and some guy just walks up to me. He's like, "You're going to buy that? You're going to hold it? You're going to tear it down?" And I'm like, just kind of, it's in Wrigleyville. So I thought maybe the guy's just hammered or something like that. So I just kind of discounted him right away. And I'm like, no, just getting pictures for my boss. That's always my picture. That's always my go-to when I'm on properties. I'm just doing this for my boss. And he goes, he starts talking. He starts talking about, what he's doing and all this stuff. And ends up, this guy, I started talking to him in the alley, right over there behind the hotel. And he he's rehabbing warehouses over on the west side, over like kind of that Garfield Park area. He's taking old abandoned warehouses, and he's basically the commercial version of house hacking. So he has a business where he does a bunch of stuff on eBay, where he is basically doing renting out the other spaces, but living himself. I think he told me like 6,000 or 7,000 square feet that he's like not paying for, that he's using for his other businesses. He's selling cars and so forth. But it was just ironic. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's a commercial house hacker. So I gave him our number. I said, let's talk. Maybe he might be a good podcast episode.
Get him on here.
Yeah. So I just thought that was, my wife thinks I'm weird because I talk to people just randomly all the time. And that one I even tried to. That guy kind of sought me out. And who knows where those type of conversations can lead to. So keep your ears and eyes open when you're out and about for everybody.
Well, you mentioned ironic. The ironic thing is I was at the Cubs game last night with our guests, and we didn't hook up, Mark.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh, man. No way. No,
I was wearing the Straight Up Chicago Investor t-shirt. You didn't see me?
Oh, I had mine on too. That's so funny. I had mine on. Oh, man. Look at that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love having the small talk. This happened 2-3 days ago. I was at, Portage Ground, little coffee shop there. And a guy saw me sketching out cabinets because we're doing a cabinet order. And he's like, "Oh, you're in real estate, blah, blah, blah." He owns what's the karate thing called? A dojo. And he's got apartments above it. He needs help leasing it. And I went and met with him today. It's just like these silly little conversations where, you never know where they're going to lead.
Well, here I am 20 years later, and you trace back some of those just random conversations or phone calls that you took that you probably didn't like. You're like, maybe should I blow this off, or should I not go to that meeting? Like those.
That's how I felt when I met you, and I'm being 100% sincere. I was like, am I gonna ever need this guy? Like, I swear to God.
I still have you on my phone as Tom Linwood Property Management. So
cool. All right, let's move on here. What's our housing provider tip of the week?
Housing provider tip of the week. It just seems kind of natural, but it's just kind of a reminder to people that are just getting into it of, as an owner, whether it be a single family that you're renting out or maybe a 2 or 3 flat, you might have common area gas or common area electric, or you're paying the water. Just kind of understand what those expenses are and make sure that you have a baseline. I don't know what our baseline is today, but I know for a while for a property on the south side, we knew that if it was over $65 a month for water, we knew that there's something wrong. And I bring it up because this time of year is when tenants start running car washes and start doing things with water more. All of a sudden, you get a high water bill. You go over there, there's a big pool in the backyard now. So just keep those things in mind. That's if you have a higher water bill, or when you get the city, will send you a notice, and they usually send it about a month after that you have a high usage for a particular day. There's a good chance they're filling up a pool that day. So we had like 4 of them last month, and 3 of the 4 were the 4th was a leak, and the other 3 were all pools in the backyard, and they weren't supposed to have them. So if you have a understanding of your baseline of your common area utilities or stuff you're supposed to be paying for as the owner, it helps you manage without having to physically be there. It's another kind of angle.
Yeah, love it. All right, let's jump in. We got a heavy hitter alert. So it's been way too long to get this guest on, but I'm glad we finally have him here. Our guest today, lifelong Chicagoan. As a kid, grew up in the restaurant industry, where he developed his core belief of service and response time. Also has a background in IT, and he's leveraged that to scale Drexel Properties into a 600-unit, $100 million portfolio on the competitive north and northwest side of Chicago. You've probably heard me mention Drexel before, and yes, that's the same Drexel that I've joined to help assist with the scaling efforts. It's also the same Drexel Properties that just celebrated their 20 years in business, which is a huge accomplishment in this industry. He's also the president of the Northwest Side Builders Coalition, a subgroup within the NBOA. And Mark, most importantly, he's an avid listener of this podcast. So I get a recap almost every Thursday afternoon of the guests, the questions we ask, and whether he got the Chicago fact right or wrong. So didn't want to leave that out. Without further ado, Jeff Weinberg, welcome to the show. Jeff, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. I was out on the lake sailing this morning, prepping in my brain for our conversation today.
Just studying encyclopedias of Chicago, getting ready for that fact at the end.
Exactly right.
Blow through right through this content. Let's cut to the chase. So 600 units is a lot, and we're gonna dive into scaling, running teams, going into the Northwest Side. Before we do that, though, it all started with a duplex, right? So talk about just getting started. Why were you interested in real estate? How did you get started here in Chicago? And we'll take the conversation from there.
Back around 1990, a few years out of college, saved up a little bit of money. My friends were starting to buy condos, and I just had the mindset I didn't want a box in the middle of space. I wanted the dirt and the building that sat on top of it. So I had the bright idea that I'm going to buy a 2-flat and rent one out. That will cover some of my expenses. When I buy a lawnmower, a hammer, or whatever, I could deduct that. So it would benefit me in all sorts of other ways. So in 1992, I bought a 2-flat. A few years later, I got engaged and I was getting married, and my soon-to-be wife at that time said, I'm not going to move into this place. I said, no problem. We're going to buy another 2-flat. And that's really where I got started.
1992, though. Give us some what neighborhood was it in, and what was the rent
price and interest rates?
Yeah, and the rent that you're getting from the other unit that was you're rented to, just out of curiosity.
Oh yeah, you're gonna like this. So first building that I bought 2-flat, it was at 3514 North Paulina, so just west of Ashland, just south of Addison. Sleepy little kind of triangle, but still considered West Lakeview. I paid $180,000 for the entire building, including a 2-car garage and a backyard. My interest rate when I made that purchase, 9.75% interest, which didn't mean anything to me at the time. I had no baseline or no knowledge. I don't remember what the rents were. I remember in the second house that I bought, or 2-flat that I bought, which was in 1994, I was getting $625 for a 2-bedroom apartment that was just a few blocks away from there. So I think I was getting about $550 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment at that building on Paulina.
I love it. That's so important, because a lot of times I'll talk to investors that might have a property for 2 or 3 years and get the rent escalation they put in their pro and maintainer. Over time, those rents will go up. Right now we're getting good opportunity to rents go up, but they will go up over time. And it's great to hear like what that was for back then.
Yep.
Yeah. And also you can survive a 9% interest environment. The world won't end.
Correct.
Just friendly reminder. People have been through this.
Right.
So, all right. So we start scaling, we start buying duplexes. At what point you're still working a W-2 job? I want to talk about that transition of at what point, like, how many units or whatever metric you want to use, did you say, this is it for me? I'm leaving the W-2 IT job. I'm going to do this full time, and just talk through about that mindset and that leap.
Well, for me, two things kind of collided. One was, I'd for years been kind of thinking about real estate, looking at real estate. A family friend, somebody who had been a residential broker for years, who had bought some real estate. We had talked for years about buying things. And in 2002, she came across a property. It was actually 2 properties in Hyde Park, so a total of 40 units. And And her and her partner approached a few people, including me, to look for money. It's a bit of a longer story here. The details aren't relevant. It ended up being one building. So they kind of kicked out all the friends but me and said, hey, it's only the one building. We want to keep you. And by the way, we want you to be the one to care and feed for it. These were two women kind of at the twilight of their career. That was 2002. If you remember the whole .com bubble, I had left that company I was with to go for another company in a sales business development role. At that time, it was like selling ice to Eskimos. There was just no business to be had. So I closed down this 20-unit building. It was in Hyde Park, 5219 South Drexel. So here's where the Drexel story comes from. And after I closed down the building, company I was with kind of said, we got to cut back. You are the last one in. You're the first one out. They made a nice deal to me. And then I got phone calls literally from 4 people saying, hey, I heard you bought that building. Are you looking for investors? I know you're interested in real estate. We'd like to invest with you. And I just at that point jumped in with both feet. And that's what got me going.
Awesome. So we buy that building, we buy a few more. At what point does this, you're on your own. At what point are you like, all right, I need a bookkeeper, and Mark, I'd love for you to chime in too, because you guys have both gone down this path. And a lot of our listeners are probably, 3, 4, maybe, this is happening to them in the near future. They're going from 10 units to 50 or whatever it is, and they're gonna have to start hiring or making strategic decisions. So talk to us about that scaling process, because it's something we don't cover on here a lot.
So I bought 5219 Drexel, and then I was starting to look for the next building to buy. And I stumbled on a building that was at 79th and Drexel. Interesting neighborhood. That was 42 units, I think, in that building, huge courtyard building. And then I had bought another building after that. And at that time, I was hands-on. I was doing everything. I was plunging toilets, doing whatever was necessary to keep things operating, right? That's what we do when we first get started in this business. In the meantime, I have to think back through, but I bought a couple other buildings. There's another story that I'll get to in here in terms of how things evolved. But when I got started, Tom, you and I were just talking about this a few days ago. You start a business, any business, what do? Go buy QuickBooks. I bought QuickBooks. And then I ended up migrating to another platform called Tenant Pro before settling on AppFolio a few years later. In the meantime, I had about 4 buildings. So I had about 100 units. And I'm going back to that 79th and Drexel building because I didn't know really where to look for a skilled person. I really didn't even know what I needed other than somebody to do essentially data entry for me. And at this building on 79th and Drexel, there was a tenant there, a young woman who was in her mid-20s, late 20s. And I was there all the time, right? This was my second building I had. And she would head out in the morning with a gym bag, and she would go and work out, and then she would go to work. I recall she worked at Carson Perry Scott. And I was just sort of impressed with the sort of ethic that she had. So I approached her and said, hey, I need a bookkeeper. And for a period of time, I had this girl who lived at 79th and Drexel coming all the way down to my house, which at that point was actually that 2-flat that I bought. I didn't mention that I converted that to a single family home. She came to my house for about 6 months. Then I finally found an office space that I had her working out of. But that was my first employee, and they did data entry essentially for me and kind of managed the books and paid bills. While I still did the tougher stuff like balancing the checkbook.
Unsolicited employee too.
Yep.
Bootstrapping. I think there's no better way to do it because I know, Jeff, you probably agree. Like you just learn so much about what has to be done in order to have somebody work for you to do it. Now, ultimately, as you're growing, you want people smarter than you down the road. Once you realize, all right, we're taking this to another level. But yeah, no, for me, QuickBooks. But I held on to QuickBooks way too long, and I just think back now about those March emails from the accountant of like 75 questions of what all these random things were. Now it's like now, like, I know we don't go through that anymore because it's just we have the right people doing it on the front end, and the 75 questions generate more questions back. And like, I used to dread the accounting season just because I did such a horrible job on the front end. It made sense to me how quickly
Right.
read, but I just like, oh, this GL, as long as everything's in this GL, I know what it's for. Like, so, but yeah, no, the bootstrapping, I think, is such an important part of the experience. You hear a lot of people want to get into it, mentors and stuff like that, and be able to just tag along with people that are doing it, even if it's for free. I think the bootstrapping part, just for the first couple of flips, I mean, I did all the work. I electrocuted my partner, but I did I did a lot of the work and especially the manual labor, because that was at least one part I knew I could do. And it just kind of gives you an appreciation as well too at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah. Jeff, looking back at those early days, like, what would be the one thing that stands out where you'd be like, all right, I would definitely change this? Right. We have a happy ending here. The story ends up great. But like, if you had, with hindsight, would you go back and say, like, what's that one change you would make?
It's kind of a loaded question. When I first started buying large buildings, the second building I bought, and almost every building after that, at the time, there was a Cook County tax incentive called Class 9. I think you've talked about it. People have talked about it on your podcast in the past. But essentially, what that availed to somebody that took advantage of was I could buy a building at that time. I buy buildings on the south side at about an 8 cap, and then I could go in and I could invest 150 grand on new boiler, new windows, new roof, and that would give me a $15,000 tax rate, 10% return, no brainer. And then I would package the building back up with the idea to sell it. So that took me into a series of neighborhoods. I got the bright idea. I really like that section of South Shore that I call Keith neighborhood. It's frequently called Jefferson Park Highlands. It's really that section that is just between 67th and 71st and east of Jeffrey specifically. And I thought, boy, this is just a great area. It's an express bus downtown. It's right on the lakefront, on the bike path, has all sorts of great amenities. This is going to be a great neighborhood. And I had the idea that I'm going to amass a bunch of properties here. And at that time, I had kind of a flipping mentality. I wasn't quite in the buy and long-term hold mode that I evolved into. So I amassed about 250 units in that area and operated great. And then 2008 happened. And all of a sudden, I was going from collecting 95% of my rent, struggling to get to 80%. And that was really when I made a pivot. So there's a lot of lessons that I learned out of that in terms of understanding the neighborhood that you're really getting entrenched into, how you're going to operate in those types of environments, and what you want to be when you grow up, kind of thing. So there's a lot that I learned from that.
Yep. And you mentioned the pivot. So you come up here, you're on the north and northwest side. For our listeners who don't know, what attracts you? Like, so, you're heavy in Portage Park, you're heavy in Belmont Cragen. Like, what attracted you to the areas up here? When you first got here, why was the flag, planted here?
I have to say there was a fair amount of luck. What's really coming to mind is instinct. I'm not sure how much distinction you can make between instinct and luck, but going back to 92 and 94, when I bought my first two buildings, Lakeview was a sleepy, kind of nothing, kind of dangerous neighborhood. And I saw it evolve around me. And that kind of gave me the notion, even the South Shore neighborhood that I was in, the Hyde Park area, so I was kind of in the northwest end of Hyde Park, just had this instinct that said, this is on the fringe of where things are evolving. And, kind of, think of dropping a rock into the water and the waves kind of ripple out. I just instinctively saw, now in Portage Park, in Belmont Gardens, in Avondale, I sort of just saw that the ripple was heading that way. I actually should say that I should have been a little bit more prepared. And this is what happens when you're in business for a long time. You kind of forget the timing of things. But I think the second or the third building I bought was in Logan Square. I still own that building today. When I bought that building, walking through the building, the basement of the building are these flagpoles with big giant flags on them that just have big circles that say drugs in the circle with a line through it. No drugs. And I bought the building from a guy who was retiring. He had 6, 7 buildings. He was selling them all and moving to Florida, retiring. And he had actually worked with neighborhood to cul-de-sac the street. This is on Spalding, 2600 block of Spalding. It's just south of Milwaukee Avenue. Spalding does not go out to Milwaukee Avenue. When this guy had the building, they did, and he worked with the neighbor and the alderman and got the street cul-de-sac because there was just a lot of drug activity there. So I got in there right after the snowball had kind of made its effect of changing that neighborhood. So I think just instinctively seeing what's going on in the neighborhood, having a sense of what's going on nearby and where the trend is going, you kind of see where things are improving, where things kind of are up against some kind of natural barrier where it's never going to change. And I essentially saw that along the Milwaukee corridor and along the Elston corridor. So I just started focusing and buying in those areas and watching the deals, just staying informed and staying on top of it, talking to all the brokers, having a good sense of other things that were going on in terms of business, restaurants, and whatever, and then just being quick to respond from there.
Yep.
Drexel Properties. Do you know where the name Drexel comes from? Do you know where this? I'm kind of doing a fun fact in the middle here, but do you know the history about that, Jeff?
Do I know the history about that?
Yeah.
Do I know the history? I'm going to make a random tangent, but 5 years ago, I was at the NBOA soiree coming up in a few weeks.
August 11th.
And somebody sees on my name tag, oh, Drexel Properties. I know someone that works at Drexel Properties. Maybe you know him. I found the Drexel Properties. I bought a building at 5219 Drexel, and I again didn't know anything when I was starting this up, but I sort of was told you got to set up an LLC to put this property in. So I called it Drexel Properties. I bought my second building, was at 79th and Drexel. It's funny, it was on the wrong side of Cottage Grove, but I called it Chatham because it sounded better, right? So that was Drexel Properties Chatham. Bought a couple other buildings in South Shore. Then I bought a building on the 4400 block of Drexel. It was actually 4400 South Drexel. And that was Drexel Properties 4400. This is about 3 years in, but we were answering the phone, Drexel Properties. Really the company back then was Jeffrey Allen Management. Allen is my middle name, but Jeffrey Allen sounds like two people. Kind of sounds like a law firm. Makes it sound like we're bigger than we are. So that was really like, I got a real estate license when I started, and it was Jeffrey Allen Management. But we were answering the phone, Drexel Properties. Fast forward, that first building that I bought at 5219 Drexel, I ended up condoing that building. So we gutted it, turned it into a condo. It was 2007. I kind of saw what was going on, but I took the chance and it worked out. I had one unit that didn't sell that I rented out. I finally sold it in 2010. And after I did that, first thing I did was I reestablished Drexel Properties as a new business entity, moved my real estate license into that, and parked the Jeffrey Allen Management and just moved forward with Drexel. So here we are today.
Nice.
Drexel. Mark, what is the street named after? Is that where you're?
Yeah. So Drexel Boulevard. Oh. Drexel Boulevard is named after, because I bought a bunch of properties on Drexel right after recession, and I was just curious. I was always curious about who gets to be cool enough to get a street named after him. And,
right.
And
so do you know the answer?
Drexel is basically the a banker that foreclosed on the land that was there back in like the 1850s or something like that. So he's I think he was like a Philadelphia banker that never even stepped in Chicago, but he foreclosed on the land and somehow got to name the street that ran through his land.
Nice. There you go.
It's a crappy way to get a name. So, right,
I like my story better.
Yeah, but also, Mark, you can just say whatever you want. Well, I would have believed anything you said there.
Yes.
So, all right. So going back to the Spalding building, I want our listeners to hear this because it wasn't that long ago. What did you pay per door there? Do you remember? Or just rough idea, like, in Logan Square there, what that price per door was?
I'll let you do the math. I don't have a calculator in front of me. It's 31 units.
Okay.
I paid $2 million for the building.
65 a door, right? 660 a door is 180. Doing pretty well.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it goes back and Jeff, you mentioned it, like you are a buy and hold investor. And we get so caught up in, and we flipping, doing this, doing that, doing the other thing, nudging rents here and there. But like, man, if you're just and you guys are both great operators here, but even if you, as our listener, if you're just an adequate operator, time heals everything, right? Like if you just ride this thing out, like time is your biggest asset here. It doesn't mean go buy a bad deal, but like, it's great that you have that at your back there. And then everything you do as an operator to make it better, great. You accelerate the process.
Well, the only thing that I would add to this, and I've heard a lot of your guests say essentially the same thing, but you got to buy it right. It's got to make sense when you buy it. The numbers got to work. You have to have a reasonable amount of buffer if you do have more vacancies or unexpected expenses, so you could weather any kind of a storm or downturn. So long as you do those things and then you operate smart, you mind the pennies, you provide great customer service, time will bring you fantastic results.
Tom, I hate to reference Trump, but back in the day, in one of his books, I think he said there's no such thing as a bad deal. It's just how long you got to hold it. And a lot of us in the Great Recession realize that you just have to hold it. But so you were out to do the flips and some of the shorter term stuff in the early 2000s. Like it sounds like you started off holding, then you kind of went to the flips, and then you had this mindset of holding. Like where's your mind at when it was short term versus long term? Like do you still do both? Tell me kind of your mindset and where it was at in making some of those decisions that are ultimately shaping your life.
I guess, Jeff, before you answer, tell the audience, when's the last time you sold a building?
Guess nobody could really see me because this is a podcast. I don't remember the last time I sold something. It's been a long time. 2014, 7237 South Bennett.
All right. So you've gone 8+ years here from last time you actually sold something.
Yep.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I think at that time I owned probably 8 buildings. Now I own like 38 buildings.
Got it. And then, a lot of people who'd get to this size, hey, like, let's coast, let's be whatever. I mean, we've been heavily active, right? Been 3 or 4 purchases this year on the hunt, making lots of offers. Why are you still looking to scale? Like, what is, we're at 600, like, why get to 800? Why get to 1,000? Like, what is, why not just coast?
That's a big question. First off, to go a little bit back to Mark's question, just to feed it into your question. When I started out, it's probably like a lot of the younger listeners of the podcast. You're starting out, you gotta eat, you gotta keep a roof over your head. I had 3 young kids at the time, so it was about generating income, not so much generating wealth. So the flipping was really a means to an end. Just like, I helped a few people buy homes. So I acted as a residential broker just because it was income. I think there was always a notion to buy and hold. I made the reference earlier in the O'Keefe neighborhood. which had some really good housing stock that I at the time thought that it was kind of an overlooked neighborhood that should have some things going for it. And in fact, probably today there's a lot of argument to say that neighborhood's got a ton going for it, considering that the Obama Library is going to be half a mile away from there. So I very early on, 3 years in, was already focused on a buy and hold long-term strategy. And the investor group that I tied myself into were people that were looking for a long-term place to park money for generational type wealth. So it started probably back in 2005, and it's continued to today, which is just a shift that I wanted to get out of that South Shore market. There were market conditions as well, just coming out of the recession of 2008. We sold those, and it's really been a grow the portfolio strategy ever since then.
Got it. And you're still bullish on Chicago. You're still anchoring here. Why is that?
We have lots of problems here, right? Mostly centered around the state finances with pensions, corruption, because it's everywhere. And as localities get more mature, so does the corruption. But look, Chicago's got great institutions. It's got great universities. It's got a really good just sort of mindset in terms of the people and the community. We're on a big body of water. Let's talk about we don't have hurricanes. We don't have flooding. We don't have fires. We don't have earthquakes. You think about, I think about, and I'm looking out in the long term, 50, 75 years, Lake Powell is going to run out of water. They've got that big dam there that's not going to generate any electricity. So what does that do to Phoenix and to Las Vegas? So I just believe that fundamentally Chicago is going to be reasonably strong to very strong over the long term. We're not going to be a Detroit. We're not going to be, I don't want to put down some of these other cities, but we're not going to be a lower tier city like a Milwaukee or a Cleveland or a St. Louis. I think the strength of what exists in Chicago is going to stay. We've got to solve this crime issue, but that is, on the news, it sounds like it's a Chicago issue, but it's not a Chicago issue. That's a macro level issue. Those things will be solved. The fundamentals here continue to be strong. We could talk in real estate about all the things that need to be done. That's bigger than this discussion, but overall, I believe in this market. I raised 3 kids inside of the city. They're doing well. Their futures look bright. So I'm really bullish on what's going on here, and I'm going to continue to invest in this market.
Nice. Love it. So 600 doors. Talk to us about kind of like what it looks like today. People talk to us a little about your setup. You're not unclogging toilets. You're not knocking on doors anymore. Kind of tell us your setup and kind of what your infrastructure looks like around the office.
So first off, I come from the professional services consulting world, which is all based on people. And if you get people out of the way, you get a lot more done and be a lot more efficient. So from the beginning, and I shouldn't say from the beginning, from the early middle, I really started to have a platform. I really looked for technology that would just simplify things. And really in 2014, I switched to Appfolio. So I was kind of relatively early on the Appfolio curve. They've really taken off and taken over the marketplace. But I knew that you needed to have a platform to be able to compete with the large operators, property management companies. And I go back to the technology because I think we use it right. We use it completely, and we take advantage of it. So that's one piece of it. The second piece of it was simply creating a culture within the environment where people would welcome to come in and work. I think that's a big part of our secret sauce at Drexel is just the respect and consideration that we have for our employees. We take care of them. We look out for them. We treat them like family. One thing that I always say is to my employees, when something comes up, when they have a need, they come first. I'm lucky if I come second, but I am not first. And having that sort of disposition gets you good people, gets people to work harder and figure things out. And it just builds a stronger team. So that's another element of it. And then probably the third element of it is that I knew I did not want to build a big people-based employee organization. So what I did as I started building the company and letting it evolve was I looked for partners and partnerships. So, we've got a lot of HVAC units and boilers and appliances, roofs. So I just really focused, kind of like the employees, but third parties. I focused on establishing great relationships with them, integrating them into our operation as if they were employees, so they have access to our platforms, so that we were able to scale and take advantage of true experts in the different pieces of the puzzle that we need to take care of it. And I've sort of built my role is really being the conductor of all of those parts to keep it moving and really to keep things out of the way of whoever needs to get something done. So, we need to have cabinets at a place for the installer to put them in. My job is to make sure those cabinets are there so things keep moving. It's just a simple example.
Yep. How do you get, when you're first starting, how do you get these third parties to respond to you? Right. If you're, it's easy now when you're feeding all this business. When you first start, how do you get that plumber to actually show up when he wants? And when you're just Joe Schmo and he's got other people to service?
How do you sell him on that relationship?
Yeah.
Pay him fast. When somebody does work for you, pay them. If they suck, pay them and say, thank you very much. And never call them again. If they do good work for you, pay them. And after a little while, they'll jump through hoops when you need. Don't take advantage of them. Plan ahead. Again, like I said earlier, stay out of their way. And it's simple things. We send them emails with work orders so they have the information. They know who to call. They know where to go. So we make their life easier. So they appreciate that so much that they'll end up doing for you when you're in a bind and you need something. Don't ask them to jump very often, but when you ask them to jump, they'll jump as high as they can for you because they appreciate you. And it's been a big focus of how we've operated. And by the way, that's the same way with the brokers and finding deals and looking for deals. It's the same thing. We were at the Chase Skybox last night talking to the person that services the loans, and just treating those people super nice, and doing everything I can to make their job easier. But they'll just do so much more, go that extra mile for you. And that's been a big part, I think, of our success.
Well, first off, we didn't see each other last night at the Cubs game because I was just a schlub in the bleachers. Skybox, right? So it's clear why we were on the same side. So that's very clear. But secondly, man, that echoes I think that's a large part of the relationship. My partner, Brian, his words that will be on his gravestone are pay your people fast. Mm-hmm. And, those, people we've had in the company sometimes that we've had to kind of drill that into their heads. They have the mentality it's only a few more days, or it's only $300, or it's only this. But that can be a very big deal to the other person. And if you get into a consistent habit of doing those things, then it just becomes part of your culture. And then people talk. Vendors will talk to each other and say, "Oh, yeah, he pays quick." They're a great company to work for. So, oh man, they
don't even say they pay quick. They just say they like working with you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If they like working with you, they'll continue to work with you. They'll work with you over somebody else.
Yep.
And it just greases the wheels that much better.
I love it. What great. That's great. That's a great lesson.
Yeah. And I'm just going to piggyback real quick. You don't realize that a lot of these guys, if they're trying to scale, right? They have a company that's going to do framing or whatever, and they want to add on, another sub under them. They need to get paid immediately so they can then pay that guy. For a lot of these guys, there's no capital to keep that machine going. They're not floating that difference. So they're taking heat from that guy who might go leave for someone else. And then like their business suffers tremendously and they can't do what they want to do. Right. Like it's for us, it's not like, oh, 2 days, 3 days, it's not a big deal, but like it could be life-changing it's a huge deal when you're in that position.
Yeah. And by the way, paying isn't always monetary. City of Chicago, you got a building violation, you got to go to admin to take care of it. The guys at admin get yelled at all day long. They get, just complaints like their problem is the person that's coming in for the violation. Like their problem is not their problem, it's the city's problem. And you come in there and you just treat them with kindness. The currency in that over time, you show up and they're happy to see you because you treat them nice, and then they help you. They are on your side. They'll get you to a resolution so much more easily and quickly. And at the end of the day, that saves you so much. But it's the value in those ultimately relationships that make it all work, that are really important.
I love it. Housing Corp at Superior, I had like 3 or 4 cases going on at one point, and I just I 2 times in a row, so 2 weeks back to back, I just brought them white roses and put it on the desk right there. And now I'm always known as the rose guy for all those people. And those people do not change over. Like they're the same people for decades. Like, so you make an impression early on by being the white rose guy, like then you're all good.
I'm going to sabotage you. I'm going to leave a white rose and trash the place. So Jeff, you mentioned that this also applies to broker. I've been amazed you've gotten to 600 units, almost all dealing through brokers, right? There's not this huge mass marketing going to sellers. Like a lot of it has been leveraging these relationships that you've built up over the years. Talk to our listeners, step one, how do you become that guy? It's easier now when you're established, you've proven everything, but early days, like why would someone bring Jeff Weinberg a deal? And what did you do to, one, get the deal, keep that relationship, grow the relationship, and get it to the point where it is today?
Well, I can only give you half the answer because otherwise I'll lose all my deals. It's kind of the same thing. It's just repeating, what I've said already. But when I find a deal, you can't be afraid to take the leap. So if you find a deal that you're going to make the offer on it and move into it. But I'm just a simple, principled kind of guy, and I go in and I make an offer on something. I'm a pretty tough negotiator. I'm a patient buyer, so I'll just sit and wait until the number comes and the seller will meet me where I'm at. But once we get there, once they meet me there, it's done. We're going to close. It's going to be really easy. We're going to move through the process. And as a result, again, it goes to the same thing. The brokers enjoy working with me. The brokers sell us to the seller that these people, if you make a deal, if come down to $50,000, whatever they need to do for the deal, you're going to close. It's going to be really simple. You're not going to get to the closing and they're going to start asking you for different things or make threats to back out of the deal. And it's that simple. I'll add to that kind of a flip side, but there's a few professions and professionals that we all work with that it's a love-hate relationship. Our attorneys that we need for a lot of different things that we spend a ton of money on that seems to be very little value in a way or brokers where you pay the commission or the seller's paying the commission and it's a high fee. But we bought a building at the beginning of this year. It was a $14 million deal. It was a big deal. We think we got a great deal on it. The seller didn't want to pay a broker commission, so he had his residential broker sell these $14 million, $7 million assets, roughly speaking. And we saw at the closing what the numbers were. And I know had he hired a broker, he would have sold it for $1 million more. So you take the 4% instead of the 2% commission, he would have made a couple $100,000 more on the sale. He was selfishly foolish because he saw the broker as being expensive and not appreciating the actual service that the broker provides. So it's kind of a two-way street. I wish I could buy all my deals without brokers, but they do bring value at the end of the day, especially when you're working with the right brokers. And you got to find those, because I will say that only a relatively small percentage actually are good brokers.
Yeah. You know what? I'll defend the brokers here. They'll say, well, only a relatively few amount of investors are true investors, right? They're dealing with tire kickers on the other end too.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the 80-20 rule, no matter what side of the table you're on.
Yep.
Mark, anything to add?
We could probably dive into a whole bunch more operations, but maybe we'll save that for the 200th episode. And,
there we go.
We'll have you back on, because I know we had a couple beers into us at the party a few weeks ago, and we talked about you being our 200th guest, and we had to drag you on sooner because someone canceled. So,
oh, geez, you weren't supposed to tell me that.
No, because that's the first thing I said at the time. Like, man, he really wanted to be the 200th episode. Like, we should do it? So we'll have it back. We'll have you back. So what you'll have the honor of is you'll only be one of the few that have been on here multiple times. That'll be the ultimate honor.
There you go. Oh yeah, now you got me on that track. I'm gonna want my robe.
Yep. The Saturday Night Live jacket.
So, Mark, wrap us. Let's do this.
All right. Awesome. All right. You know these questions, so I'm expecting to be prepared. I'm expecting to get some good answers here. So as an investor or operator, however you want to do it, what is your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do it and make it look pretty easy while other people have struggled?
Wow. That's, I knew this was coming, but, just being focused, being good at what you do, being compassionate, treat people well, take the chance, but be smart. Don't torture the numbers. If the numbers look good, move forward. I'll leave it at that.
Cool. So similar now, one piece of advice you would tell someone that's yet to buy their first property here in Chicago. What would you go back and say to 1992 Jeff Weinberg?
Do it again. It's kind of the same thing. Look at the deal. If you want to do this, if you're feeling passionate about it, run the numbers, and however you've done the numbers, talk to other people so that you're not completely going it alone. But if it feels right, take the chance. Just jump into it and do it. You'll make mistakes, but you'll learn. Just be calculated and don't take your eye off the ball.
You might have a similar. I'm going to ask. I'm going to go out of order here. You went through the Great Recession and you saw things leading up to it. What's one thing that people that are just getting into it should be careful? There's a lot of people that call me up all excited about it. I'm like, man, like this is kind of not 10 years ago type excitement. So what's leading into kind of being higher in the market? Any advice for anybody based on your experience?
Well, be prepared for it. So, right now we've got COVID was kind of an interesting twist on it, but there was also a lot of government money and so it was a little unnatural. So it's hard to use it as a benchmark, but we're headed for a recession. People are going to lose jobs. The economy is going to slow down. I've been having lots of conversations with people just to try to get an idea of what I think ultimately it's going to look like. I don't think it's going to be as bad or last as long as 2008, but it's going to be harder to find tenants. It's going to be harder to find people to do the work. Be prepared for it. Be nimble. Keep a little bit more cash on hand so that you could weather the storm if you're not having people pay the rent. But know that your nearly 100% occupancy is going to be something less than that. Know what your break-even point is and manage to stay ahead of that. So if it means think differently about how you list the apartments, how you find tenants, do all those things so that you stay ahead of it.
I love that. We break-even point. People should be, because I like that. That's great. Good advice. What do you do for fun?
I do a lot of things for fun. Some of them think like some people respond to that cool. Other people be like, you're nuts. But I love to travel. I've got a wife and 3 kids, and we've traveled the world and will continue to. I'm a bit of an endurance junkie, so I run marathons. I've run marathons on 4 different continents. I hoping to run in Tokyo. In 2 weeks, I'm doing a week-long bike ride from the Missouri River to the Mississippi River with something called RAGBRAI, right across Iowa. So those are things that I do. Running also is just kind of my mindfulness therapy space. Where I can go out for an hour and a half run and kind of zone in and tune out the world and just kind of rebalance myself. So
that's awesome.
Other people might think that's crazy.
No, Lawrence. I mean, do you ever? I can't think of his last name. Lawrence
Dunning.
Dunning. Have you ever talked to him? Like he did all 7 continents.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
I know him from your podcast, but I've never met him in person.
Yeah. So that's interesting. It's been a year since we did the rim to rim to rim, and Jared, shout out to him. He's doing. I never heard of this before. He's doing he's running 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. Starting Friday at noon and ending Sunday at noon. Like that's crazy.
So let's have a side talk how you strategize that.
Last June 13th, I got on my bike with my 17-year-old son at the time, and we did a self-supported bike ride from Chicago to New York City. And my plan is when I turn 60, which is in 2 years, to ride from Chicago to somewhere on the West Coast, which will take me 2 months. So Tom, you better gear up for me being gone for that. You heard it here first.
Just come back. So
I will come back.
what is a good book, podcast, or self-development activity besides traveling across the continent on a bike that you would recommend to our listeners?
It's interesting because I listen to your podcast and I critique it with Tom every week, and I agree with most people. When I don't, Tom hears about it. I used to read a lot of business books, self-help books, and I think partially as you age, you see, you guys are seeing me. I've got reading glasses on, so I don't read quite as much as I used to. But last book that I read that I would recommend, which is a little bit different, but still a great book in terms of leadership and perseverance, is Eric Larson's Splendid and the Vile, which is about Churchill and World War II and dragging the United States into the war. And just, Eric Larson is just a great writer, but a really good book in just leadership and style and pulling people in and networking with the people. So that's a book I think I'd recommend.
Yeah, another
Mark,
guest recommended that.
You recommended that one to me, didn't you?
That's the same author as Devil in the White City, and it was brought
exactly. Yep.
Stacy from CIC brought up this one, and I read it. It was awesome. I probably told you about it. Yeah, what a great book. Yeah. I learned so much.
It's interesting. There's another book that I read 30 years ago that I reference frequently, particularly with my kids. I don't know that I'd recommend it because I don't think it holds up, but the ideas in the book I think are very relevant. And it was we had brought in at the company I was with at the time, brought in American Management Association to give a young group of technology kids running a company, leadership management skills. And the instructor of the class recommended a book simply titled What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And it's just all about what goes on in your head and the things that you do and how you could change your thought patterns and your actions just by having that conversation on a positive basis, and kind of visualizing it, and it'll materialize kind of thing. And it's really stuck with me. And any book that has that theme, I would suggest considering, because we tend to get inside our heads and have a pessimistic look on things that just takes us down a path that, in the case of what we're talking about here, that just says, oh, I shouldn't, no, it's not right. And it just flips you to the mindset of, I could do this. It'll work out. I'll make it work. I'll focus on it. Any problems I'll have, I'll get through it. So that's a big recommendation, I think.
That has been in my want to read for about 3 years. And now I'm happy you brought that up because that motivates me to read it now. So I can keep passing it every time. So, all right.
It's an old book. Wow.
As someone referred it. Yeah, everything I get on my list is referred by somebody somewhere. So someone smart like you gave it to me somewhere. All right. Besides yourself, name one person in your local network that you'd highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource.
Very tough question. Because, I've got a pretty vast network, but I did think about this because I knew it's a question that you had asked. And I am going to drop the name. The name I'm going back to is Mike Daniels with Kagan Management. He's been with Kagan Management since he was in college. He's been with Kagan Management for close to 40 years. It's crazy to think. I bring him up because we were talking about kind of my origin story, and I was just starting out. I had bought that first building, and I got a call from somebody saying, "Hey, I heard you got into real estate. I'm getting into real estate. I'm trying to network with people. You want to meet for coffee?" So I met with this guy for coffee. And then 2 days later, I got a phone call from Michael Daniels. Now, I was getting in the business, and Mike was on my list of somebody to call, but I didn't want to call him because, I hadn't done anything yet. So I was going to wait a year or so before calling him. I get a phone call out of the blue from Mike Daniels, and we're in touch. We're friends. I went to high school with him. I've, known him for a long time. But the guy that met with me then met with Mike Daniels, and he said to Mike Daniels, "I'm meeting with, people that know something about real estate." And the guy mentioned my name to him. So Mike Daniels called me up. But from that, I ended up doing, Mike and I bought a bunch of buildings together early on when I was getting started. So he's been a great resource to me. He's a real down to earth, level set kind of guy. They've got 10,000, 15,000 units that they manage. If you talk to him, he's smart as a whip. He knows everything about the business and operating and all that, but he's so mild mannered about it. He's a good resource. But there's many, 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 many others.
We gotta get Mike on the show. Next step 2 here. So
there you go.
Jeff, thank you so much. You provided a ton of value during this episode. How can our listeners learn more about you? And is there any way they can provide value to you?
Well, you can find me on drexelproperties.com or on LinkedIn, are 2 places to find out more about me. I'm welcome to talk to anybody, give any kind of advice. If you own property on the northwest side of the city, which is really west of 90 and north of the Congress Eisenhower Expressway, that's kind of the Northwest Side Builders Coalition group. That's a group where networking, advocating, and educating. Look for nsbchicago.com as well. It's a resource that I'd encourage people in that specific geography to join. The MBOA, which I sit on the board of, is another great resource to stay informed. So those are vehicles to reach me and be involved with things that I'm sort of passionate and involved with.
Awesome. All right, Mark, we're going to see how cultured you are here.
All right.
I say that as you're wearing a backwards hat, so I'm a little nervous about this. First off, do we have a listener you're playing for?
Yeah, so we're playing for Sherry Donis, who bought a Straight Up Chicago Investor t-shirt. So
thank you, Sherry. All right, so we mentioned the original Duplex was in Lakeview, so we got a Lakeview question for you. Lakeview has numerous theaters. It's got several music venues as well. I'm going to make it easy because I want Sherry to win here. I'm asking you to name, there's, I think, 20 something. Can you just name 2 of either music venues or theaters that are within the official Lakeview, I'll call it, grid?
I'm not even going to guess. I'm bad at I don't, so I guess I have no culture.
Jeff,
I'd be curious to have see how many Jeff could name off. I guess that would be where I'll punt this one too.
Let's see, you got Shubas, you got Metro,
yep,
You got, I think it's called Lincoln Hall.
You got one at Belmont Sheffield as well, just south of on
Belmont,
Sheffield.
Belmont Sheffield. Oh, the Vic.
Yep.
Formerly Clubland.
You got a nice marquee on Southport, like Waveland-ish, Grace, some right around there on Southport.
The Music Box Theater. Oh, the Mercury Theater.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Yep, you got
Music Box, got Mercury. Oh, we got the Biograph. Yeah, I mean, I could keep going.
There we go. Sherry gets a t-shirt. We bailed her out.
All right, Sherry. Jeff stepped in for me today, so thank you very much, Jeff.
I thought you get the music. I knew that the theaters are hard. I thought you might get the music ones though.
See, I've never been a big fan of concerts either. So the density of that many in Lakeview, is there a reason, or is that how it is in all kind of neighborhoods? I guess I'm just totally not up to date on that stuff.
I don't know the history, but it's definitely more dense there. Jeff, go ahead.
Well, if you really dig, there's a ton of buildings that you don't know are actually movie theaters behind the buildings because they've been closed. But you think about hot summer days and cold winter nights, people would go to movie theaters to stay cool or stay warm because they were air conditioned in the summer and heated in the winter.
Gotcha.
So there's in Lincoln, well, you got the Davis Theater in Lincoln Square, but that's not Lakeview, but kind of across the street, kitty corner. There's a dojo you were talking about earlier that's in what used to be 1,000-person movie theater. There's a ton of 500-seat movie theaters all over the city, really.
Okay.
I know Goodman
with Kaiser.
I know Goodman, Ford, all those. That's all I know is the ones down there in the Loop. But all right, awesome, man. What a great episode, Jeff. Look forward to having you back for the 200th episode. Tom, thank you as always. Listeners, go to straightupchicagoinvestor.com and sign up for the 10th annual MBOA Summer Soiree, which is on August 11th. I keep saying 10th, on August 11th. So sign up there. You can click on our website. You could go to mboachicago.com and sign up there as well, too. Jeff, thank you very much. Tom, thank you. And listeners, we'll see you next week.
Thanks all.